Okay, well, a little over a year ago, I started having a bunch of different health issues, and they just kept kind of building up. So I eventually went to a doctor, a holistic doctor that tested me for food allergies and all kinds of other things. And one of the things that came up in my testing was significant exposure to mold and toxins. And she told me that I needed to get my house tested for mold. And she gave me a company that she had worked with before that was out of Florida. And she only felt comfortable recommending them at first because that was the only company she dealt with that she knew that took care of it to her standards. And so then I was talking to my chiropractor, who I talked to for lots and lots and lots of medical things, and wholly trust. And he had recently met Bill and learned about the process that American Mold Experts uses. And he told me, you don't need to go with a company that's in Florida that's going to be difficult to deal with and all that, just call Bill. So I was like, all right, well, I'll call both of them and I'll get, I'll set up meetings with both and I'll get quotes or whatever. And I called both, and the other company took a few days to get back with me, and they were going to be out like weeks from when I had called because they grouped their travel together. And Bill called me back, I think the same day, and we played phone tag, and I missed calling him back. And he kept pursuing me because he was like, this is important, it's your health, it's a big deal, you need to get this taken care of. So I ended up working with Bill because it just, he was more reliable and he was here, and it sounded like he had what we needed to what he had to offer what we needed. So
he also answered tons of our questions.
And he did. He came out and talked to us and made me feel comfortable, helped me understand the importance and why it's an issue.
Yeah, there was evidence of mold in your system, and so the doctor recommended that there could be mold in our house or in the environment that was causing high levels of mold in her system. And what was interesting was we kept getting second opinions and talking to other people, because the response from our doctor, as well as Bill, as well as virtually everyone else we talked to, is, are you still living in the house that had those results? Every time people saw our results, they were always concerned. And
our numbers were pretty high.
I don't know if shock's the right word, but the first question everybody consistently asked is, are you still living in that house?
I didn't grasp quite how dangerous it was before. I didn't know anything about mycotoxins. I didn't know, I'd heard mold is bad, but I didn't know we had any, so I just didn't get it.
So we started looking into what that can do and how it can affect your health and your brain, and how it's really bad for children and adults, and all these things that were like, yeah, this is a really big problem. And so we really liked Bill, and we trusted what he was saying, as well as, anytime his team came into our house.
Well, for me, I didn't really know that what I was dealing with was that related. I had all kinds of different health issues. I'm still not exactly sure which things were specifically from the mold. I've always struggled with digestive issues, but it suddenly kicked up into a different level, to the point where I was questioning it and needing to go to a doctor. And then I started having strange rashes and eczema start popping up that I was unfamiliar with. That had never happened before. And I even had a bout of shingles that just came up out of nowhere. Normally that's triggered by some kind of stressful event or something else going on in your health, and I didn't know that there was anything going on, but it makes more sense looking back on it that I was dealing with the exposure to the mycotoxins that was making me sick, and my body was like, whoa, and popped up the shingles.
Shortly before we had the house remediated, I started getting an eye twitch that I had for about 2 months. It was very abnormal. That's not something that, normally if I get an eye twitch, it's stress related and it just lasts a couple days, but having it last for a couple months was crazy. And then when we moved out...
And you said brain fogginess.
Yeah, a little bit. I noticed travel fairly regularly, and I noticed that on one of my trips in that same time period, I was having more trouble just thinking clearly and remembering people's names. And it wasn't anything extreme. It's like what would happen if you were just tired, which frequently am when I travel, but it was a little bit abnormal for me. And then we moved out of our house and moved into an apartment while our house was explored to find the source of the mold and to see where it was and where it had spread. And when we moved out, we all immediately felt better.
Well,
My eye twitch went away.
Both of the kids had some health issues as well that we figured out after we moved out were related to the mold. My son was a little over a year at that point, and he had been a good sleeper, and suddenly was sleeping horribly and very disturbed when he was awake, like very uncomfortable, physically bothered, but I couldn't figure out a source. Wasn't teething or some stomach trouble or anything like that. He just was really not sleeping well, and we'd be up for hours in the middle of the night while I had to coax him to relax and go back to sleep. And then as soon as we moved out, within 3 days, he was sleeping more peacefully. He still was waking up, but his wake-ups were quick and peaceful and not I was pacing the floor with him for hours each night. Hold on a minute. And then my daughter, hers seemed to present more behaviorally because she'll get very, you can sit with me. She will get very agitated when she doesn't feel good. If she's not feeling well or if she's sick, her demeanor and her behavior totally shifts, like a Jekyll and Hyde type change. And we were having some issues with her at the time where she would just have these explosive, angry moments that we couldn't understand or explain, and it wasn't who she was, so it was just kind of out of nowhere. And she had some digestive stuff. So that stuff slowed down almost to nothing when we moved out, and she was completely easy to deal with and agreeable and pleasant, and it was just great because it's her personality, who she is, who we knew that she was, and it was like able to come out freely because it wasn't being, agitated or whatever. It was like she was a different person when we moved out. And we still have, both kids still have occasional issues, but those things were just like all the time and clearly a problem. And then
my eye twitch went away.
Yeah, eye twitch was one of the days.
Your skin healed up.
My skin changed. I still have issues, but some of that, like I said, is related to other things besides mold. But I have been trying to heal my gut and do some other things to get well, and realized that with the mold in the system, I wasn't able to do any of that because it just kept keeping me from healing.
Yeah.
So
one of our friends
slowly making progress now.
One of our friends is a health coach, and she was always a good resource to bounce our results off of. And she was similar when she saw the results. She was like, "Oh wow, you guys really need to get out of the house and get that addressed." And she said that really all the other work you're doing to try and get healthy is kind of irrelevant if you're living in mold. It's undoing everything that you're doing. And talking to American mold experts and Bill, one of the things that he really had to do was kind of walk us through not just the science of mold, but just how it shows up in people's houses, because we weren't aware of any kind of event that had occurred in the time that we were living in the house, and so it was hard for us to understand where some of this mold was coming from. And especially because mycotoxins, you can't see them, you can't detect them. And where the mold was in our house, it wasn't visible in any way, shape, or form.
We didn't have any signs of water damage. We didn't have any, we hadn't had a flood. We hadn't had anything that would make us think, oh, we might have mold here, because it wasn't evident anywhere.
Yeah, and through that process, we found out that our house had poor air circulation, which wasn't helping turn over the air, which causes some things like aspergillus. And then when we had mold experts out to our house after we left, they found out that there was actually just poor drainage in our roof and our gutters, and that was seeping into a corner of our wall where the bricks join, and it was just absorbing through the bricks for over 20 years. and the mold was sitting on the other side of the brick in the OSB, and we never would have found it if we hadn't done the tests, because it wasn't visible anywhere. And I think that was the hardest part for us to come to terms with, just understanding how this terrible threat to our health could exist and be virtually invisible.
Just trying to pull up a photo. I don't know if you may be able to see it on the video, but that's the one wall of the office where the mold was just a complete wall. And it actually grew up into his room as well, which is part of why he was having trouble. It went upwards, and if we hadn't seen how bad that was, we wouldn't have known that there was any issue in his room to go find it. So one other health thing that I had forgotten to mention, when I'm imagining when mold started growing in his room, because there wasn't very much of it, but when it started growing in his room was right around the same time that I was starting to notice health issues, and I was sitting in the rocking chair with him a lot, because he's a baby, and I'm in there with him a lot, and whenever I would sit in there, I would have a strange sort of sensation, like not like I was smelling something, but just my nose was like something was different. And I could maybe smell something, but it wasn't smelling it, and I just thought maybe it was allergies. But then I started to lose my sense of smell a little bit, and I didn't really notice that so much until we went to the beach, and I couldn't smell the sea air like I normally would. And then when we went a year later, after we got out of the mold, everything was normal, and I could smell it, and I was just, it's wonderful.
That was also around the time you started sleeping a lot worse.
Yeah, it was all. That's why I think it was probably when it grew up into that spot in his room. Around that time, my health stuff started to get worse. I was spending more time in that room. His sleep started to get worse. He started to have more issues, and I can smell it a lot more sensitively than some people can for some reason, and which I've been told is once you get out of the mold, you're more sensitive to it later. So whenever we walk into a building with it, I can smell it. It just it will start to bother me. And then another interesting thing that reminds me of, because we were talking about how we were so much better after we left the house and got into a clean environment. And then we would go, we actually, we were at the time going to a church that was in an old building. And every time I would walk in, I would feel, it's so moldy and it's just gross. It makes me feel sick. But it didn't seem to have any effects on me long term before we moved out of the house. But then the next time that we went to the church after we'd been living in the apartment, we were all set back a little bit for about a week, especially my son and I. The sleep was rough again. He was having more issues, and I can't remember if our daughter had issues or not. But I didn't feel good, and I was having more trouble. So it's kind of like a confirmation of okay, well, this apparently is why we were feeling better, because that stuff is not in our system anymore. And now we're reintroducing it by going into this building, and it's back. So that was kind of a really good tangible evidence for us that we were improving, going in the right direction. Well, in our case, we kind of dragged our feet. We went slowly getting it taken care of, and I didn't really grasp the importance of it at the beginning. I just thought, that's something we have to deal with at some point. I have all these things I'm working on with my health, so that's something I need to get eventually. I didn't quite grasp, from when I got tested to when I finally got in touch with Bill and started getting things working, that was a pretty decent chunk of time, and I didn't really grasp that it was that serious. So I would tell people, if you think you have mold, if you know that you have mold, if you have sickness that you can't explain, you can't find a source of it, you need to investigate it and take it seriously and move quickly and not put it off, not be afraid of it, because you have to deal with it. And then, it was worth it. If I had known at the beginning how much of a difference it would make, I would have started with that. Even beyond some of the diet changes and things that I was making, I would have started with the mold, because it's impossible for you to fully heal when your body's being attacked by that stuff. And it made me so much sicker. It made our kids sicker. It made him sicker. It's just, we were all living in this toxic environment. So do it quickly. Don't wait would be my advice. And no matter what the cost is, find a way to make it work, because you can't put a price on your health and your wellness of your kids, and it's just worth it.
No, I think that, I really wish that our doctor would have stressed more the importance of pursuing, when Becky got some test results back, the comment was something of, it looks like you have mold in your environment because your mold levels are high in your body. We should get that tested. It was just kind of an offhand comment, and I wish that would have been
or at least
taken more seriously.
I don't know that it was offhand, but I didn't grasp the importance of it by what she said. And at that point, she didn't know that it was actually in her home. She just was saying, you need to get your house tested in case it's coming from there. And if it's not, then you're going to have to find the other source of it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like, you should do that first. I feel like I wish she would have told me that part.
And that was my point.
Because it's urgent.
It's important and it's urgent. And I wish that it would have been more stressed to help us understand and for us to prioritize that, because that is the first thing we would have tackled. That's more important than changing our diet and doing anything else. So that's what I have to add. Just, I think mold is one of those things that's difficult for people to understand, because you can't see it lots of times, and because it's less obvious and less visible, and so it makes it hard to understand.
And it's not understood by a lot of people. They don't. I mean, even my doctor, or not the holistic doctor, but the kids' doctor, we were talking about how we found mold in our home and how our kids were having issues from that, and they just assume that it's like respiratory allergy type related because they don't understand the mycotoxin part yet. And they just know like mold can make you have allergy issues or, whatever. They don't understand the neurological side effects, the gastro side effects, the whatever makes your baby not sleep. All those things like that, that stuff I don't think a lot of people grasp yet. It's not, I don't know if it's new to them or it's just not accepted or what, but